hit send. Keep the drop-down option as all panelists. Today's presentation is What's New in Phoenix version 8.2. Today's speaker is Chris Mehl. Chris is currently a Phoenix Framework, IVIVC, and WinNonlin Product Manager at Certara. He's also been a software trainer with the company since 2003. Chris earned his bachelor's degree in molecular biology from The Ohio State University and also has a master's degree in pharmacology from the University of Wisconsin. Chris has conducted more than 200 training courses with desktop products such as Phoenix WinNonlin, IVIVC, NLME, and Trial Simulator. Chris, welcome to today's event. I'll now turn it over to him to begin the presentation.
Thank you, Suzanne. Hello and welcome to the launch webinar for Phoenix version 8.2. It's available for download now and was actually released in July of this year. In today's session, I would like to talk about the key new functionalities of Phoenix 8.2. These include improved automatic reports in WinNonlin via the Reporter tool, an improved ratios and differences tool for use with workflow templates, the user-friendly up-to-date online help, an integrated validation suite for Phoenix NLME, the 21 CFR Part 11 compliant plugin in Phoenix called Integral, and last but not least, the CDISC plugin called PK Submit. I wanted to take the time to mention that the changes you're seeing presented here are coming directly from customer feedback. So your feedback is very important to us to help us improve our products. We're not just thinking these ideas up on our own. We rely on you to provide your feedback. So please continue to do so. So in the first segment, I would like to talk about the new Reporter features. So the key enhancements are that the resulting report document is now immediately displayed in the Results tab after running the Reporter object. So no longer do you have to go to a View an External Viewer menu. The completed reports can be generated as Word, PDF, or both. And there's an improved user interface for plots, as well as some additional options for tables. For example, do not split statistics in columns or rows. There is an automatic creation of table of contents for tables, figures, and lists, and the formats are the common table of contents or separate lists of tables and figures. So here are some screenshots that show the updated interface for Reporter. On the Report Setup tab, the table and figure caption listings option is presented here. So you can either choose table of contents or separate lists for the tables and figures. Additional options such as the orientation of the page in portrait or landscape layout are also presented here. This is an example screen snapshot of a table of contents in the Word format, docx, and also in the PDF format. With respect to plotting, there's an improved user interface for Reporter. In previous versions, you had to navigate some tabs at the bottom of the screen. And in the latest version, you just find the plot of interest, and there's a little gear icon next to it that you can bring up for the figure configuration. So as examples, you can set the y-axis scale in your report as linear, logarithmic, or request both to be presented. And it can be log-based 10 or log-based E. There are also some nice latticing features in which you can arrange the plots in a lattice format by checking this box and then specifying the number of columns per row. There are optional grid lines that can be overlaid on the plot, as well as figure numbers within the lattice cells. So this is an example plot in Reporter showing the terminal phase regression from a non-compartmental analysis for multiple subjects and formulations. And we see here this is a 3-column by 4-row lattice. And this is an example of the summary report table from Phoenix Reporter. There is automatic figure numbering. So with respect to tables, for example, if this was the 3rd table in a series, it would be listed as table 1.3. and then the custom title, which is pulling information from the input data set to construct the title, as well as free-form text. And then we have the formatted table here, which is a summary of PK parameters for a tablet formulation, along with summary statistics across the bottom. So at this point, I would like to switch to my Phoenix application and demo a few of these reporter features. Okay, so I have my Phoenix application selected. And Suzanne, if you can let me know if you have any difficulty seeing it. Otherwise, I will go ahead and proceed with the presentation.
Looks great, Chris.
Great, thanks. So I'm in a Phoenix project, and I have a simple PK study where we have multiple subjects that received either a formulation of a tablet or a capsule, and then the recorded PK data, which are times and concentrations. I have here in my project some individual subject plots. So these are overlay plots of, on each page is an individual subject, and then the figure legend with the different colored lines shows the capsule versus the tablet formulation. I've also set up an overlay plot on a semi-log scale by formulation. So in the first page, it's all subjects that receive the capsule, and the second page, all subjects that receive the tablet. A non-compartmental analysis was then performed on this data to compute PK parameters. And then the PK parameters are summarized in a Phoenix table split out by the formulation. So we have the formulation as a group variable here, all of the subjects in a vertical listing that received the capsule, selected PK parameters, Cmax, Tmax, half-life, AUC last, and AUC infinity, formatted to 3 significant figures, and then summary statistics for each below. And then since we're grouping on the formulation, the second table is related to the tablet formulation. So let's say that this is a type of analysis I've run, and I want to assemble these results into a report. What I do at this point is go ahead and use a reporter object in my Phoenix project. So the Phoenix reporter has a setup tab and a checklist where you can pull individual inputs and outputs from the various objects in the project. We start with a section break. Section breaks can be used to change the orientation of a particular section. Let's say you were looking at a series of plots. You might choose portrait, but if the upcoming section has some wide tables, for example, you might want to switch to a landscape format for the next section. Here we have the exploratory plots. And if I go ahead and click on the little gear icon associated with it, I can go to the Figure tab and then choose whether I want to have both linear and log plots, or just linear or just log plots. In this case, what I've done is I've specified both linear and logarithmic, log base 10. And since these are 2 types of plots, I've identified 2 columns per row. So essentially, each row will contain an individual subject's data, one plot in linear and the other in log. I'll go ahead and click OK. And there is a nice preview so that you can see when you make various selections how it's going to look. Okay, similarly, I have my overlay plot selected here. And I can also toggle the options here. In this case, since it's just a single plot, I've chosen to not add any additional plots or make any other changes. Okay, for the NCA results, again, I can do the latticing feature here, where I want to lattice. In this case, I have 3 columns per row. I might want to toggle grid lines on and off in the interface here. And then I also have the NCA results in a table, as well as the table result. So when I'm ready to go ahead and create my report, I'll go ahead and run Reporter. At which point I get forwarded to the Results tab. And in my options here, if we look at the bottom panel, I've selected the option format to be both Word and PDF. And so what I've done is made a report document So this is in the Word format. There's a nice preview screen where you can view the report directly in Phoenix. Here we see the table of contents starting with figures, which are the plots, and then followed by tables. As I navigate through the document, I see the linear and log PK plots by subject. So the left column is the linear plots for each subject, and then the right column is the log plots for each subject. And there's also some nice zooming features. So if I want to zoom in on a plot, I can use this easy-to-use slider bar to accomplish that. Okay, here we have the overlay plots. Again, we have the figure listed by number. So this happens to be figure 1.2, overlay plot for the capsule formulation. Overlay plot for the tablet is figure 1.3. And then we have the NCA best fit regression by subject and formulation in a 3x4 lattice. In the first table, this is a listing of all of the final parameters from NCA. And then lastly, we have the formatted PK parameter summary tables. And so if I then want to save this report, I can export it to Word. So I'm going to just go ahead and simply click Save. And then I can pull up my report in the Word document. And then if I want to navigate in the table of contents, I can control-click anywhere in the table of contents to jump to a section of the report. So let's say that I want to jump to the terminal phase regression. I can just use the table of contents to do so. So I'll go ahead and close out of the Word view and then also show the report in the PDF view. The PDF view is a little bit more user-friendly with respect to the preview because it has the PDF built-in paging. I can jump to the end or just navigate like one would in any PDF. Okay, so that's a summary of the reporter features. I'd like to pause here to find out if there are any questions related to reporter.
Hey, Chris. Yeah, it does look like we have some questions. Someone was asking about the reporter, and they wanted to know, with the plots, they wanted to know, can you do linear on top and log below instead of side by side?
Great question. Yeah, so if you want to do linear on top and log below, what you would need to do is set up the plot in Phoenix in that direction. So you would essentially create the plots with linear and log plot and just assemble them as figures and interleaf them. Are there any other questions on Reporter?
Yep, it looks like there's one more. Someone wanted to know if they needed a separate license to use Reporter.
Great, yeah. So for Reporter, Reporter is actually considered to be part of the Phoenix framework, which means that if you have any license for any Phoenix product, you can also get Reporter bundled with it. So it does not require a separate license.
Oh, got one more question, Chris, on plots. Someone wants to know if you can create mean plots with error bars.
Yes, you certainly can. That's actually handled in the XY plot object in your Phoenix project. So what you do is run descriptive statistics to compute mean concentrations at each time point and associated standard deviation or standard error that you can use for the error bars. And then map those at standard deviation or standard error in the error bar mapping of a new XY plot. And then once you've created the plot in Phoenix, that plot, like any other object in Phoenix, can be assembled into the report.
Great. Looks like there aren't any more questions at this time, but folks, do keep the questions coming, and we'll try and answer them as many as we can with the time allotted.
Great. Thanks, Suzanne. The next feature I'd like to talk about from Phoenix 8.2 is the Ratios and Differences tool. So the Ratios and Differences tool actually was added to Phoenix in 8.1. And what it does is it performs calculations on PK parameters, computing the ratios of these that are essential for study reports and interpretations of results. So applied study types where one might want to perform these computations include average renal clearance, accumulation ratios in a multiple dose study. So you're comparing the profiles after multiple doses to the single dose data. If you have demographic data available, you might want to, for example, do ratios of gender differences in PK parameters. Also to compute parent to metabolite exposure ratios, perform dose proportionality analysis, and also evaluate exposure ratios for food effect, drug-drug interactions, or relative bioavailability. So this tool is in the data group in Phoenix. So one would select send to data and then ratios and differences. In Phoenix 8.2, this tool is now improved for better use in workflow templates. I'll go ahead and switch back to my Phoenix application so you can get a look at the ratios and differences tool. Okay. So I want to briefly just look at my input data set here. This is actually a toxicokinetic study in cyno monkeys, but it's actually a very large data set. So there's a lot of components to this. There's multiple days. There's day 1 and day 14. The routes of administration can be either intravenous or oral. There are multiple dose groups. There's a placebo, 10, 30, and 60 milligram dose groups. We also have gender information available, females and males. And there are also multiple analytes. So the parent compound is TA, which stands for test analyte. And there's also a metabolite called 4-hydroxy-TA. So having all of this data available here, I can actually perform analysis related to these different types of studies that I discussed on the slide. So in the ratios and differences, I've of course performed non-compartmental analysis and got results for those. And then from that non-compartmental analysis, I'm sending certain results onto the ratios and differences tool. So as an example, I might have want to evaluate dose proportionality. So this is where we are comparing the different dose groups. So there's a 1 milligram per kilogram dose group, a 10 milligram per kilogram dose group, and a 60 milligram per kilogram dose group in this particular study. And I might want to compare the dose normalized Cmax for the 10 milligram per kilogram group to the 1 milligram per kilogram group. So all I'm doing is identifying that dose group is my comparator variable, mapping it as filter. I provide any relevant sorts to get unique profiles such as day, analyte, and gender. And then I'm just simply setting up an XY computation of the Cmax for the 10 milligram group compared to the 1 milligram group. I can set up another comparison of Cmaxes for the 60 compared to the 1 milligram group, and also likewise the dose normalized AUC for 10 compared to 1, as well as AUC for 60 milligram per kilogram compared to 1 milligram per kilogram. At this point, I would go ahead and run the ratios and differences tool and get the outputs. In this particular study, the unstacked view is probably the easiest to look at. And so on a per profile basis, what we can see here is the ratio of the Cmaxes as well as the ratio of the AUCs. And these are in these columns at the end. So the ratio of the 10 to the 1 for each profile type is provided in this column. The Cmax ratio for 60 compared to 1 is in the second column. AUC 10 to 1 in the third column. And AUC 60 to 1 in the last column. Another type of XY comparison would be the accumulation ratio. So with accumulation ratio, remember this is a multiple dose study. So in this case, my filter is the day. What day am I looking at? I again provide the sort variables required. And let's say that in the bottom panel, I want to compare Cmax, AUC last, and AUC tau for day 14 compared to day 1. So it's a simple ratio here. And then on my results, I'll again look at the unstacked view and move over to the right to find my accumulation ratios for Cmax, AUC last, and accumulation ratio. Another type of example is the gender differences. So if I go back to my setup, I'm now filtering on gender because that's my comparator. And then in the bottom panel, I'm setting up a ratio of females to males for both Cmax and AUC last. On the result panel, unstacked view, my Cmax ratio, female to male, is shown here, and then the AUC last ratio shown in the next adjacent column. And then one more example is parent to metabolite. So in this case, I actually have two worksheets coming in. I have a worksheet for the parent, and I have a worksheet for the metabolite. So I'm filtering by analyte in this case, and I want to compare, in the bottom panel, I want to compare Cmax and AUC last for the parent, which is test analyte, compared to the metabolite, which is 4-hydroxy-TA. Okay. And then in my result panel, I can once again find these ratios in nicely formatted columns here. So I'd like to pause at this point and see if there are any questions about the ratios and differences tool.
Hi, Chris. It looks like we have had some questions come in. Somewhat not on the ratios tool, but still great questions. So someone wanted to know about an end user, how an end user would upgrade from 8.1 to 8.2. And I'll actually put that link. I'll let you talk about it, Chris, but I'll put that link in the chat for everybody.
Yeah. So that's a great question. So version 8.2 is available at our main website, www.certara.com, in the download section, and Suzanne will provide the link for that. When you download the application, it's an installer, so you'll need to be able to run the setup.exe as administrator. Oftentimes, our end users leverage their IT department to help them with the installation. But it's only possible to install one version of Phoenix on the machine at a time. So if you then go ahead and run that Phoenix 8.2 installer, it will uninstall the previous version and replace it with 8.2.
Chris, someone else wants to know, talking about going back to the plots, lots of plots questions here, which is great. Someone wants to know if you can generate a plot with a broken axis in this new version of WinNonlin.
The axis breaks. So axis breaks are currently not possible in the Phoenix application. The reason for that is because of the charting control, which is the Dundas control, and that does not support axis breaks. But we do have a future product line and development in place for plots to look at implementing features like axis breaks.
Looks like this is our last question on this section. Someone wants to know, with the improvements to Phoenix 8.2, do you have to rebuild a workflow if something is updated earlier in the workflow?
No, you don't have to rebuild the workflow if something's updated earlier. Maybe we can get some clarification on that. I want to make sure I understand the question correctly. So, if you maybe made a workflow in Phoenix 8.0 and then you install 8.2 and want to run it in 8.2, you can certainly do that. Is that the question, or is it more related to constructing the workflow and performing the steps in Phoenix regardless of version?
Yeah, not sure. Maybe the person who asked that can provide some clarification. There is a question about metabolite ratios. Someone wants to know about conversion with molecular weight and whether that's possible to make that conversion in Phoenix.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Let me go back to Phoenix briefly and touch upon that. So I'm going to reshare my Phoenix application. And in one of the sub workflows, we actually do this molecular weight comparison. So I'm looking at a tool called the Data Wizard in Phoenix, and as we know, the parent and the metabolite might have different, are expected to have different molecular weights. So we do something called a column transformation. In this case, we're taking the Cmax and we're converting it from mass volume to molar. So we're just applying a formula here, a custom function. If the molecular weight of the parent, for example, is 459 grams per mole, you can simply apply that conversion factor as a custom formula here. And then there's some additional steps here for the in the transformation for the AUC. And then if we look at do a column properties, we can apply the units. In this case, it's micromoles per liter for the CMAX and for the AUC. And then the result column is the conversion of the CMAX for the parent from mass volume to micromolar, as well as the AUC for the parent. And likewise, we could do the same thing for the metabolite in a data wizard, just using a different conversion factor. So let's say that the parent gets hydroxylated and it has a higher molecular weight of, say, 563. Then we use that conversion factor for the metabolite.
Great. And looks like we have a few more questions. And this may be beyond the scope of the webinar. This may be a question we have to answer in email. But someone wanted to know if you could comment a little bit about the difference between the original plots in Phoenix 8.1 and the new plots in Phoenix 8.2.
Okay. So yeah, I think that's a little bit outside the scope. We do have a plot type called the next gen plots, which gives you an idea of a new plotting engine that uses the Vega control, and it's designed to allow you to try out the different plots. But I think we can address that one offline.
Great. And then I think, so the clarification about the workflow, so someone says when we create a ratios differences object and update something earlier in the workflow, do we have to rebuild the ratio differences object, or does it reset?
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a great question. So we did experience that issue of having to rebuild the ratios and differences in 8.1, but in version 8.2, we actually fixed that issue so that if you start working on some objects that are upstream in the workflow from the ratios and differences, you can simply refresh your existing ratio and differences tool.
Looks like there's one last ratios question. Someone says, in the ratio example you showed, you used the filter, but if the data are in different worksheets, is it necessary to use the filter setting?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Let me come back to my Phoenix application. So I do have an example of using the two worksheets, and that's in the parent and metabolite. So in this case, I've got worksheet 1, which was the result of that data wizard we just talked about, converting the parent to molar, and then worksheet 2 was converting the metabolite to molar with a different conversion factor. But what the filter allows you to do is it allows you to pick which column in the data set you're going to use to populate your X and Y. So, for example, when I'm selecting from this list, I get to choose a parameter, but my value is what's it associated with? Is it associated with the test analyte, or is it associated with the hydroxylated? So what that filter value does is it allows you to populate these menus and identify what populates column X and column Y. So the first part of the question is, can you use two different worksheets? The answer is yes. And then, why do we use the filter? And the filter is just simply to identify at what level you're doing your comparison. Okay. Any other questions on ratios and differences?
Nope, that looks to be it.
Awesome. So another greatly improved feature of Phoenix is the online help. So in the past, Phoenix had the help in a series of PDF documents, and everything was always in a tree view where you could navigate around. And now the help has been moved online, and you can search and view results online directly from the application. And you can run how-to queries rather than describing each software button. So you have a search bar at the top. You can navigate using the tree view if desired, but the search is very intuitive and easy to use to find help on various topics. And other additions to the help include direct access to the support email. So this is our help menu here, and the items I'm talking about are going to be on the other side here. You can directly email support, navigate directly to the user forums, find training via Certara University, look at tutorial videos for WinNonlin, NLME, and PK Submit, and then also look at About to find your Phoenix version and help number, version and build number, And then also there's a very user-friendly log viewer that's been added. So you can show the log and all levels and toggle the level of logging that you're looking at. And I'll go ahead and show that in the Phoenix application here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and navigate to the Help menu. So if I go to the Contents, this is going to bring up the online help. And let's say, for example, I want to look up an NCA parameter and the formula for computing it. So in the Phoenix 8 series, there's actually a new NCA parameter called span.
Chris, it doesn't look like you're sharing.
Yeah. Thank you. I need to.
Now you're good.
Got it?
Yep, perfect.
Okay, thank you. Right, so I had clicked the Help menu in Phoenix and then navigated over to Contents. I got taken to the online help, and let's say that, for example, I want to look up the new NCA parameter span. I can go to the non-compartmental analysis topics and see where span is listed here. So I can very quickly find the formula for span, which is the upper end of the lambda z range minus the lower. So essentially the lambda z range, lambda z upper minus lambda z lower, divided by the half-life. So what the span gives you essentially is the number of half-lives that are in your terminal phase. But these are, just different topics you can look up, very user-friendly. Let me go ahead. I'm going to actually share my screen, because as I toggle back and forth between Phoenix and the web, I'm going to need to share multiple applications here. So a couple of other features in the help. You can email support. So let's say that you have a question and you want to be able to email support. It will immediately open up your email and have the support@certara.com pre-populated in your email. And let's say you have a question, say, I need help installing my software, for example. And then you could just send this directly to product support. Okay. Some other features here include the user forums. So again, I'm in the Phoenix, clicking Help, going to User Forums. There's a variety of user forums where you can see examples of how to do various things in Phoenix, various tasks, like how do I create a table, or there might be modeling related questions. Maybe there's a model you want to create that isn't directly out of the box in Phoenix. And we have, for example, our PML school, where you can view all kinds of different custom models that have been developed in Phoenix by both end users and from the Gabrielson and Weiner textbook reference. And then let's say that you wanted to find a model related to clearance. I can just go ahead and search, and then find questions and answers related to custom modeling with clearance. Returning to Phoenix in the Help menu, there are also a number of tutorials for WinNonlin, NLME, as well as PK Submit. So let's pull up the Phoenix WinNonlin tutorial, for example. This does take you to certarauniversity.com, where you'll need a login to access the content, but it's very simple. Your email address and then a password that you create, and then click Sign In. And then once I've signed in, I get taken to the complimentary tutorial. So this happens to be the Phoenix 8.2 WinNonlin tutorial. And then all I need to do is press Start Learning Now, and I get taken right to a tutorial video that describes exactly how to do some of the basic operations you want to do to use Phoenix WinNonlin. I'm moving back to Phoenix. Of course, we have the Help About Phoenix, which shows you the version and build number. This is 8.2.0.4383, which is the Phoenix 8.2 release, as well as what licenses are active on the machine. And then lastly, in the Help menu, we have a log viewer that allows you to view logs. So logs have always been part of the Phoenix application. all they do is they track different system events like opening the application, closing it, creating a project, saving a project, all kinds of different operations that happen as you're using the Phoenix application. But they've always been stored in text files that maybe are a little bit difficult to find. So if you click on View Log, there's actually a very handy log viewer that just basically parses out all the log information and allows you to see it very quickly. And maybe I want to take down some of these and look just at a certain level of logging, such as a high level of logging. And in this case, maybe I had a licensing issue. So I can track in here and say, oh, okay, well, I didn't have a license at 9:07 a.m. this morning, so I go ahead and install the license to remedy that problem. But you can always go ahead and view the log and then use that handy email support link in the help menu to send the log file to support if you have further difficulty. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to the webinar and find out if there's any questions about the online help.
Doesn't appear to be any questions about the online help. Actually, hold on. Yeah, I think we're good, Chris.
Great, great. Thanks, Suzanne. So I'll go ahead and move on to a few other topics here. The next being the new NLME validation suite. So NLME stands for Nonlinear Mixed Effects Modeling. It's a module that's available in Phoenix that allows you to perform population PK/PD analysis. And in our software industry, it's very important to have a validated system so you know that you can trust your results. And so in Phoenix 8.2, we've added an automated validation suite that allows the user to validate the functions that come with Phoenix NLME on their local machine. So the NLME validation suite is integrated with the Phoenix application. It's not a separate third-party application of any kind. It does require you to purchase and install a separate license, and it runs standard test cases in your computer environment. It compares the numeric results on your local machine to reference output files that were generated at Certara by following the same exact steps in a Phoenix project with an NLME model. The validation suite generates non-editable PDF validation reports with embedded links in them to CSV files of outputs, as well as any differences detected between test and reference in the outputs. It also comes with a validation suite template documents in Microsoft Word for easy modification and use, and a PDF document called the Computational Engines Verification Report shows comparisons of results from NLME with other softwares that ran an analysis with a similar method. These other third-party softwares include SAS and non-mem. Okay, so just a brief overview of what's involved with this validation. It can be done in 4 simple steps. All you have to do is go to the validation menu at the top of Phoenix and select Start Validation. Select the product of interest, which in this case happens to be NLME, from the checkbox. Then press Start Validation. The status window will show you exactly what's happening as the validation is running. So the green means a test is completed. The blue play icon shows a test that is currently running. And then any grayed out tests have not been run yet. But what really amazed me when I ran this the first time, we've seen previous validation efforts with other customers, and running all the tests could take hours or even days to get through all of them. And the NLME validation suite actually runs in under 30 minutes on most machines, which vastly improves the time and effort involved in validating the software. The validation report is generated automatically. You just simply use the validation menu and then go to Validation Reports. Okay. So an example of the validation report includes this. In the screenshot here, we see a listing of the test case, the status, which is pass-fail, the result worksheet of interest, and then these blue links you can actually click on to view the result directly. So you can look at the reference file and also look at the file from the output file from the run, and then there's also a difference file that you can use to evaluate any differences. So I'll go ahead and switch back over to the Phoenix application. Okay, so I have actually run the NLME validation suite on my local machine. I have a validation report that I've actually produced, so I'll go ahead and pull that up. So we're now looking. Are we able to see the report, Suzanne?
No, it doesn't look like we can see the report.
Okay, let me make sure to.
There. Now you can see it. Yep.
Okay, so this is a PDF that came from Phoenix. It has a boilerplate template here that has a title page with a signature page. You can print your name, sign your name, list your company and institution, and show the date. We have here a summary of the environment on which the validation suite was run, the number of test cases passed and failed, the start time and stop time, and notice the runtime here. The total runtime for this was 27 minutes and 45 seconds. It also has information about your local system on which the validation suite was performed. So, for example, Windows 10 system with an 8 CPU Intel processor. Okay. Here we have the test status pages where you can write any types of notes associated with each test, but this is the pass-fail result. And then I'll navigate down to this section where we actually have some different outputs here. See, there's a Laplacian. Let's say that I want to look at one of my results here. Maybe I want to look at the thetas from the reference. So I'll go ahead and open the file. And briefly switch to Excel. So in this case, we have a model with 4 different parameters: volume, clearance, Ka, and IC50 were parts of this model. And this is from the reference file. And then if I switch back to the and look at the run file, I can just simply click on that and find what happened when I ran it on the local machine. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing for now. Are there any questions about the NLME validation suite?
Yes, there are some questions, and so some folks have asked about licensing, and I'll go ahead and answer this. So, folks are saying, I've got an NLME license, I've got a WinNonlin validation license. Do I need to buy a separate license for the NLME validation suite? And the answer is yes, you do. There is a WinNonlin validation suite and a NLME validation suite, and they both need separate licenses that need to be purchased. And then there are some other questions. Someone wanted to know if you can see a difference overview without clicking the links.
A difference overview without clicking the links. Well, so in most of these, there's no difference. The report will identify whether or not there's a difference. Let me go back to sharing my screen. Hopefully it will. In this first test that I ran, it didn't actually detect any differences. So it wasn't listed in the report, but in the case that you do have a difference, it will flag it in the report.
Someone also wants to know whether you can generate validation reports on WinNonlin.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a validation report on WinNonlin. It has a very similar interface to the NLME validation suite interface that I showed you. It has a simple validation menu where you can view the WinNonlin report and run it. So that's this menu here for Phoenix. In this case, if I want to look at the WinNonlin, I can run the WinNonlin validation suite. Okay, and then it will just show the status. So it is running through the tests. We can actually see how fast it's running through all of these tests here. It's really
Chris,
pretty incredible.
I think you're not sharing.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, no problem. A lot of clicking back and forth.
Yep.
There you go. Yep, now it's showing it. Yep.
Okay. So this is actually the WinNonlin validation suite in action. So it's running some individual tests. That was a Michaelis-Menten model, a pharmacodynamic model. One was stimulatory, the next one inhibitory. Now it's running a PK clearance model, and so on. But when the test cases pass, you don't really get any difference output in your report. It just shows kind of a blank column. It shows one column that says it's passed, and then the annotation column doesn't have anything in it. But if there was a failure or a difference for any reason, it does get flagged in the report. Okay, so this does take maybe 20 minutes to run to completion. I'm not going to sit here and run all of it, but if I go again to validation reports, I can pull up the report and view these individual test cases. So this error messages column, if there were a difference between test and reference, it would get flagged here in error messages. Okay. Other questions about the validation suite?
No, I think you've answered all of them.
Perfect, thanks. Okay, so I would like to introduce a couple of other products that also can interface with Phoenix, and the interfaces for these have been added in Phoenix 8.2. The first product is called Integral. Integral is an update from the application Phoenix Knowledge Base Server version 4. So what is Integral? It's a new central data repository plugin in Phoenix. So it's essentially the next generation version of PKS. So it's a 21 CFR Part 11 compliant data repository that streamlines clinical pharmacology workflows. A validated data and model repository for collecting, managing, and storing multiple types of data sets for analysis, sharing, and reporting of clinical pharmacology, pharmacometric, and all other clinical data. It's a compliant repository that ensures PK data is traceable, reproducible, and secure, and is now available through a Phoenix plugin as well as via a web browser. You can learn more about Integral by viewing our on-demand webinar at the link here that Suzanne will share with you. Okay, so just a sneak peek at Integral. So if you're in the Phoenix application and you select Integral, you get taken to our simple login screen with a username and password, and then proceed to sign in. When you make changes or save anything from Phoenix to Integral, the electronic signature screen comes up where you can supply a reason for the change. Like let's say that you filtered BLQs or you added 12 new subjects from the latest round of results, and then supply your password and then save the updated results. The Integral browser, this is the file repository. So here's a listing of all of the files that are stored in Integral. And it supports both Phoenix, but also many other third-party types of files as well. So for example, in the browser, we're looking at an R script that's used to create some VPC, or visual predictive check plots. So that might be associated with some NCA analysis or some other types of files in a study, and this central repository can handle any of them. The Integral system does have a security model that assigns user access rights. the levels of access are read only, write level to be able to write and save to the system, and then admin is the level at which you can actually manage other users. Okay. One other feature related 21 CFR Part 11 compliance is the audit trail. The audit trail does show any types of save events, and whenever you enter an audit reason, essentially, it gets recorded in this audit trail that can easily be pulled at any time from the browser. Okay, so again, for more on Integral, we do encourage you to look at our webinar that's shown here. Another product that's just been released along with Phoenix is our CDISC compliance tool called PK Submit. This is an upgrade from the previously used CDISC Navigator. So PK Submit automatically generates PK CDISC, which stands for Clinical Data Interchange Standards Consortium, domains during NCA. So you might have a PC domain for concentrations, a PP domain for PK parameters, and so on. But what this PK Submit tool does is it removes the tedious, time-consuming, and error-prone tasks involved in creating SDTM or SEND data sets. It has an intuitive, simple, and single interface supporting all study designs and types, and is now available through a Phoenix plugin, the PK Submit plugin. For more on PK Submit, we encourage you to view our on-demand webinar that's shown here, and will be distributed after the call. Okay, so to recap what we've covered today, the key new functionalities of Phoenix 8.2, they include the improvements to Reporter, the improved ratios and differences tool, the launch of the user-friendly up-to-date online help, the integrated NLME validation suite, and then the two new plugins, one that allows interface with Integral, and a second that allows you to create CDISC data sets. So I did want to lastly mention that we have listened to you. We very much appreciate and encourage your feedback. And I will now go ahead and turn it over to Suzanne, who will show you different ways that you can provide that feedback. Suzanne?
Hey, everybody. Thanks, Chris. I just shared the link in the chat for everybody for the PK Submit webinar if you want to learn more about that. And we do have some time for a few more questions, so please do submit those to the Q&A box. So Chris, someone wants to know whether WinNonlin can interface with Watson using direct data import using ODBC.
Yes, absolutely. It is possible to do that. Let me go ahead and just briefly bring this up. But there's actually a Watson plugin that can be used, and you can set up in your preferences. There's a Watson import and export. Essentially, what you do is you specify your server configuration, your host, your port, and your database SID, and also account information such as the Watson account and the service account. The plugin also has a variety of business rules for interfacing with Watson. They have to do with text replacement labels for BLQs below or above the quantification limit, the precision for numeric data, and also a way to filter out subjects. For example, if some of the subjects have no sample results, you can check this box and not bring them into Phoenix. Remove empty columns, remove rejected samples. There's a whole host of features that you can use to configure your interface with Watson. And I believe we have a webinar on how to use this tool as well. But this is certainly possible.
Great, and I believe this is the last question from our audience. Someone wants to know whether the release notes for Phoenix 8.2 are available on the Certara website. Yeah,
so on the Certara website, I believe those get posted to our support section at Certara. They're also available, so the release notes do get installed with Phoenix to the Phoenix installation directory. So if I share my screen, and just go to my Phoenix installation directory. So it's under Program Files, Certara, Phoenix, Application. Okay, but yeah, so check our support site. What we'll go ahead and do is show you exactly where you can go to get those release notes as a follow-up to the call.
Okay, great. Thanks, Chris. Before concluding the webinar, we have a few short announcements. On November 12th, we have our Phoenix user group meeting, which will be taking place in Boston. And if you come to this, you will learn Phoenix tips and tricks, get a roadmap preview, and the ability to provide feedback and more. Contact your Certara rep for more info on how to sign up. The next webinar in the series will take place on September 25th when Professor J.M. Cardo will present how to perform IVIVC for delayed release drug formulations. And on October 16th, Drs. Eva Berglund and Julie Bullock will present U.S. and EU trends in clinical pharmacology for regulatory submissions. You can register for all webinars in the series by visiting certara.com/webinars. On behalf of Certara, I would like to thank you for attending today's presentation. This concludes the webinar. Goodbye and have a great day.